Sergeant Keith Williams gave him 10 and 10. Mrs. Vicki Stevens Red, a former police officer, female, black female who was fired, gave him a 10 on character integrity and did not know of his work performance, so unknown. And even the officer who probably got him jammed up in this situation gave him an unknown in character and integrity because she didn't know him that much, but an 8 in work performance. He totaled out at character and integrity 8.9% out of 10. Job performance 9.0 out of a possible 10. Why is this officer walking the street now without a job on the police department? Here's some officers, though, when they look at his character and integrity and job performance as perceived, who they seemingly don't care about him one way or another. The chief of police, didn't think that none of the good stuff in his record mattered. Captain Wayne Avery, who was retired but was there trying his best to make sure that he sink and drown rather than survive in this hearing. Lieutenant Carl Fletcher, one of the people named in the rumor. Lieutenant Jeffrey Pettis, named in the rumor. Captain James Barbie, named in the rumor, was out to make sure that the officer went down. Lieutenant Marquette King, who was a black lieutenant and internal affairs investigator, drummed up the charges on this officer. And then an officer, Reginald Washington, also black, told some untruths that it was hard to imagine. But we understand how these things can happen. These officers seem to have the throw the baby out with the bathwater mindsets. Past cases used to create slippery slope to termination on this officer. Now this is how they set things up to take Officer Calloway out. On April 14th, Acting Captain Charles Stone and Sergeant Wayne Avery dug up a 10-month-old conflict with Officer Calloway, citing that he refused to take a call, which had been dealt with by the former Chief Monroe in June of 2004. And Calloway was charged with insubordination in April of 2005 and suspended for 3 days. That's when it all began. Charge stacking began at that time. On April 14th, Officer Calloway picked up a toy pistol that was brought to school by a student and pitched it into a trash can. He should have turned it into the crime lab. This action brought 4 stacked charges. For example, truthfulness, 1-day suspension. These are the recommendations. No incident report, written reprimand. False and misleading report, 1-day suspension recommended. Processing property and evidence, 2-day suspension. So out of that one situation involving this gun, there were 4 days suspension given and a written reprimand. Gotcha opportunity. Officer Calloway arrested the wrong white woman and treated her as she behaved. This set off the equivalence of a firestorm. Chief Thomas Michael Burns and his good old boys seemingly found it necessary to wait for another opportunity to fire Officer Calloway. After all, firing him for arresting the wrong white woman, Vanessa Schaefer, would possibly have racial overtones. So they waited for the next shoe to drop on Officer Calloway. Anything would do. On October 22nd, 2008, they got their chance. He discussed that rumor with Lieutenant Brazee, which included the names of 3 white male supervisors who were not pleased that Brazee published information about crime and corruption within the department, as well as an alleged threat to get Brazee. Macon PD's good old boys jumped all over this incident. Lieutenant Brazee's motive is yet undetermined, but she undoubtedly became a part of Officer Calloway's problem. Black Lieutenant Marquette King headed up the IA investigation. And Chief Burns stepped up to put an end to Officer Calloway's law enforcement career. Officer Calloway was offered the opportunity to resign or be terminated. He did not prostitute his principles to resign. So Chief Burns fired him on the charges that were stacked and served up by IA Lieutenant King. Officer Calloway was probably expected to drown in his own tears over the unjust termination. Rather, Officer Calloway chose to fight for justice in what is undoubtedly a very hostile workplace, where black and female police officers have few rights that white male officers, especially the good old boys, are bound to respect. Officer Calloway retained the services of the Use of Force Research Institute to represent him during the appeal process. The appeal was heard by Judge Robert E. Herndon. Leon E. Chief Fraser of the Use of Force Research Institute takes the position: the Macon Police Department is sick and in need of a doctor. Again, Judge Robert E. Herndon is in the right place at the right time with the right case to make the right decision to bring a halt to some of the racist and unprofessional mess that exists in Macon Police Department. Judge Herndon was asked to reinstate Officer Joseph B. Calloway and to send a message to the Macon Police Department that maintaining the status quo is unexpected, unacceptable, and devastating for black and female officers and the citizenry as a whole.